It was close to 2 in the morning, when the building should have been nothing but echoes and dust. But there I was, keys on my belt, jingling, mop leaning against the wall, trying not to think too hard. That's when my hand hovered over the cart and went for the old leather case instead. The violin wasn't pretty. Cracked wood varnish, stripped raw strings, older than I'd like to admit, but to me, it was still alive. I tucked it under my chin and let the bow fall just to see if I still remembered what it felt like to speak in music instead of words. The first notes were rough, shaky, but then they steadied and something poured out. Loneliness, memory love, I couldn't bury. I wasn't playing for anyone. The hall was empty, or so I thought. Because up there on the balcony, a woman stood frozen, her hand gripping the rail like she was afraid if she let go, the music would stop. She didn't make a sound, but later she told me her throat had tightened. Her eyes stung before she even knew why. She was Isabel Harper, a music critic who had sat through 1,000 perfect performances, but none of them cracked her open the way a janitor with a broken violin did at 2 a.m. That night, she walked out without saying a word. And I packed my violin away, same as always, like a man ashamed of still having a heart. The next morning, I stood by the vending machine waiting for a cheap coffee to finish dripping. Felix, my supervisor, came whistling down the hall, all energy, no clue. Another night with the ghosts. Huh? Eli, he said. I smiled tight. Best company I've had in years. He laughed, kept walking. That's how it always was. People saw a uniform, a mop, nothing else. They didn't see the man who once stood under stage lights, the father who once played lullabies until a little girl's eyes closed in safety. They didn't see Clara, and I preferred it that way, or so I told myself. Meanwhile, across town, Isabel sat in a diner staring at a blank document. Her editor wanted another safe article on the rising stars of Westbridge Conservatory, but all she could think about was me, the man with the violin. She started typing. The janitor who played my soul awake. It wasn't a review, it was a confession. She didn't even put her name on it. I tried to bury myself in work scrubbing gum polishing floors. But then Miss Lorraine, the founder of the conservatory, a woman with eyes sharp enough to cut glass, stood over me one morning. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. I blinked. Miss what? Being heard. She didn't wait for an answer, just left me there with a question I couldn't shake. That night, when I walked into the lobby, my violin case wasn't in the cart. It was on the bench, waiting as if someone had placed it there on purpose. I looked around. Nobody. But I picked it up anyway. Halfway through a melody, a whisper echoed down from the shadows. "Don't stop." My hands trembled. I wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to be. A few nights later, Isabel finally stepped out of the dark. I'd been standing by the glass atrium, staring out at the rain, talking to myself, or to Clara. I thought if I played the right song, maybe I could bring her back for just one more night. My voice cracked. Then I heard, "Maybe she's still listening." I spun around. And there she was. Not a critic this time, not a stranger. Just another soul carrying grief like it was oxygen. We sat down in that empty lounge. She told me about her sister Eleanor, a pianist who died in the middle of a performance. Isabel hadn't touched the keys since. I told her about Clara, my daughter, who loved to conduct me with a plastic straw, who hid under the piano when the fire came. We sat there like two people, finally admitting we'd been haunted too long. And for the first time, I let someone else carry a piece of Clara's memory with me. But peace doesn't last. Not when people like Julian Harper, Isabel's father, are still breathing. He was at a donor gala weeks later, laughing with his whiskey glass like the world belonged to him. The man who once offered to sponsor Clara on the condition I'd step aside Let him own her story. When I refused, he made sure I'd never play another stage. When our eyes met, his smile was poison. "Ward," he said loudly, still pushing chairs instead of sonatas. My fists clenched. He leaned close. "I offered your girl a future. You turned it into a grave. I swear I nearly broke right there." The rage was white hot, but before I could swing, Isabel's voice cut through the room. "Enough." She slapped him so hard the sound echoed off the marble. The crowd gasped, and she said, shaking, "You lost the right to call yourself my father the day you turned a grieving man into your scapegoat." He didn't have a reply. He just walked out the coward he always was. That night I sat on the floor of an old music room violin in my lap, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. I thought I had protected Clara from becoming a commodity, from being bought and sold, but in the end she was gone, and I was left with silence. Then, as if by fate, I found a letter tucked inside my old locker, written in crayon. "If you stop playing Daddy, I disappear." My hands shook. That was the moment I knew if I didn't find my way back to music, I'd lose her twice. So I started writing again. Not masterpieces, not symphonies. Just one piece called "The Notes We Leave Behind." Isabel sat with me night after night, sometimes bringing coffee, sometimes just her presence. One evening she whispered, "I hear you." And I realized those 3 words were worth more than applause. When spring came, I walked onto a stage for the first time in years. Not in a tux, not pretending to be the man I used to be. I wore my janitor uniform, sleeves rolled silver clef pin on my collar, Clara's. The crowd didn't know what to make of me. Then Isabel stepped out in a navy dress, sat at the Steinway, and nodded. Together we played. A duet broken, honest, raw. Not perfect, but true. Every note felt like we were dragging grief into the light and saying, "Here, this is ours, and it's still alive." When it ended, the hall erupted, critics, donors, students, all on their feet. But I didn't play it for them. I played it for Clara. And for Isabel, who stopped hiding, same as me. Months later, we built something Clara had once scribbled in a drawing, the Clara Project. A little music school in the basement walls, painted bright shelves lined with donated instruments. Kids who thought they'd never touch a violin or piano were suddenly laughing, learning, believing. Isabel started a column called Notes from the Basement, telling their stories. And me, I traded in ghostly midnight solos for teaching children how to let their hearts breathe through music. One night after a student recital, a 10-year-old girl tugged my sleeve and said, "Mr. Ward, I want to sound like him," pointing to a boy who'd just played Clara's lullaby. I smiled and glanced at the mural of Clara we'd painted together. "You already do," I told her. And in that moment, I swear I felt my daughter's laugh ripple through the room. But here's the part that might sting Isabel's father: never apologized. Men like him rarely do. Some say I should have taken his deal years ago, given Clara every chance, even if it meant selling our souls. Others believe I was right to walk away, even if it cost us everything. I live with that question every day. So now I'll ask you, if it were your child, your legacy, your choice, would you have taken the deal? Or would you have chosen silence like I did until grief forced you to play again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me, this does broken music still matter? Because I've learned one thing. Sometimes the quietest notes are the ones that echo the longest.